On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very exclusive treat. He's a celebrated international best-selling author, lyrical genius, voice of resilience and empowerment, spoken word performer, speaker, designer, and artist, just to name a few. With roots in the vibrant city of Toronto, he's taken the world by storm with his raw, unfiltered insights on love, life, and the journey of self-discovery. His words, whether through his books or his powerful spoken word performances, resonate deeply, challenge us to question, reflect, and evolve. And he's the author of 3 books and an iconic blog with over a staggering 100,000 readers per month. No big deal. His mission is to inspire us to unlearn the misconceptions we've been fed and to embrace the authentic, beautiful chaos that is life. He's a force to be reckoned with, a true modern-day philosopher, and an embodiment of creativity and authenticity. Please welcome the insightful, charismatic, articulate, and handsome, the abundant, Humble the Poet. How you doing, Humble?
I'm fantastic. That's a fantastic bio right there. I should have to borrow that one. Making
Good,
me feel good about myself. Yeah,
good, brother. You feel nice and elevated? I did good by you?
yeah, for sure. Everything's beautiful. Yeah.
As I like to say to a lot of mutual friends, it's your story. You wrote it. I just said it.
Mm, completely. That's beautiful.
This is so much fun. We were chatting before we hit record, and I don't think we realized how close we were geographically. We probably could have done this in person. Maybe we'll do the sequel. We're in for such a treat today. For our listeners that might not have been familiar, my best suggestion is to do a deep dive, play catch up, check out all his soul penetrating, awesome content, grab his books, all the things, play catch up. What I think is most valuable today is we just have an unbelievable conversation. Before we dive in, we're going to get a little weird. You ready for me?
Let's do it.
What is your superpower?
My superpower is radical open-mindedness. I'm constantly trying to create as much gray space between black and white as possible.
Wow. So that's beautiful. So it's not this or that. It's maybe it depends, right?
Yeah. Well, it always depends. It's never this or that.
Yeah.
And I think, especially now in this world of social media, where people don't people don't have enough time, space, or attention to discuss context and nuance. So it is either this or that, and you can be super polarizing, and you see it with the language, and like this next tip will absolutely blow your mind. Like everyone speaks in hyperbole, and then when you think about like different political situations that happen, everyone's got to pick a team. You think about different things happening, everyone's got to take a side. And the truth is, there's so much in between that. Like it's such a wide spectrum, and you know, to create that spectrum, to create that stuff, that gray in between the black and white, you just have to be curious. You can't be judgmental. You have to be curious, and when you're curious, then you said the world gets infinitely larger. The universe gets infinitely larger because you're no longer limiting yourself to this perspective that you were probably given more than you formulated.
I love this so much. Isn't being curious a wonderful trait?
I think it's essential just for your
Yes.
mental health. Be curious, like stop judging things. Like, if it's raining outside, don't be like, "Oh, the weather's bad." Like, ask yourself, ask a question instead. Like, well, how can I benefit from this weather? What can I do today to make the most of this day? Like, create opportunities instead of simply having this kind of recipe in your head of what's good, what's bad, what's good news, what's bad news. We all have that in our lives where like something immediately we thought was good news in the long term turned out to be bad. Something that we thought was bad news in the short term turned out to be great. And we got to just look back at our own history to realize that. So the goal here is to keep our minds open as much as possible. And that just requires us to, not be married to our beliefs, ask way more questions and pass way less judgments.
So good. One of the things that I say often, more so for like business, but goal setting is marry the process, divorce the outcome. And what I mean by that is absolutely set your intentions and have those big, audacious, scary goals, but then detach and divorce and marry the process and be open-minded as to what might happen along the way or a new relationship, a new connection, a new idea. And so, and it just reminded me of what you were just talking about.
Yeah, it's the rainbow is the pot of gold. And it's, really enjoy that journey and pick a journey that you like. I know a lot of us, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this show, they got big dreams, and a lot of their big dreams are coming from a place of survival and scarcity, and they're trying to get out of that place. But eventually you gotta look at a journey that you can be on sustainably forever that brings you joy. You know, and once you get out of survival mode and once you have enough for your basics, adding a couple of zeros to your net worth isn't going to make a difference if you're not having fun, if you don't have community, if you're not around good people, and creating that. I saw Trevor Noah yesterday, on stage, and he did a Q&A at the end, and they asked him if he missed the show, and he goes, he doesn't miss the show, he misses the people he was working with on the show. He goes, he doesn't have that anymore. That's what he's missing. And it's like these are the things that are actually important once we're past survival. If you're in a tax bracket where you're not surviving right now, by all means make your money. But beyond that, once you're past survival, you know, adding a couple of zeros isn't going to improve your quality of life. What's going to improve your quality of life is having something to look forward to, having people you look forward to seeing, having activities that bring you joy, having a healthy mind, having a healthy body, having a healthy family. And very few of these require, endless amounts of wealth. They just require a shift in our.
I can confirm because I have contrast, right? Because my past life before I reinvented myself, I feel like I've had two lives and I was making money, but I was miserable.
Mm,
And couldn't agree with you more. And I'm also a big believer in that when you really pursue what you love, you'll figure out how to monetize it. I'm not really concerned about that. Another word that comes to mind, you mentioned joy a lot, and this is something that I've really started to associate with my definition of success is the word peace, right? Do you
yeah,
sleep well? Like, are you excited about what you're doing? Are you waking up? Are you not stressed out? And it's so interesting. Like, once you're past survival mode, it's beautifully articulated by you. No surprise there. Like, once you have the means to eat and live, then it's like, what's really important?
yeah. I think definitely, having purpose, having projects, having a mission, having something that you are willing to put in a lot of energy towards. But I think you hit the nail on the head bringing up the word peace. So often we have such a lack of peace that we chase pleasure. And the thing is, pleasure is rarely about feeling good anymore, and it's more about feeling less bad. And there's a really big difference of chasing pleasure when you're at peace versus chasing pleasure when you have no peace. And I think it's a really important thing to think about, especially when we think about what brings us peace, because we are so like dopamine infused with social media and everything happening so quickly that we oftentimes can think peace is boring. We think people who bring us peace can be considered boring, and we're chasing sparks and we're chasing excitement. And it's like that's not sustainable. And it really is, your best moments in life are the times that you don't want anything to change. You're happy with things as they are, and you just want to freeze that moment, and that's generally peace. And I think it's a really important thing that people should choose a life of peace over a life of happiness, because you don't learn when you're happy. We need to have the emotional roller coaster. We need to be in the dumps sometimes because that's when all of our evolution comes. We need to be uncomfortable because that's where all our evolution and our unlocking comes from. So it's a great point that you brought up with peace.
This is awesome. Is it possible to be at a little bit of rock bottom or in a rut in a season of growth and also be happy?
I think so. I don't think happiness should be a goal. I
Yeah.
think happiness is a consequence, and it comes when it comes, and it doesn't need to be there all the time. We all can't be perpetually in a state of happiness. As I said, 'cause I don't think there's a lot of growth there. I think enjoying yourself, finding joy. I think for me, that's been a really big thing I've been learning. This concept of joy. You talked about you just got a puppy. I have a 2-year-old little mini golden doodle,
I
and
love it.
realizing that yeah, she's adorable. But and the little things like kissing her stomach brings me more joy
Oh,
than a
man.
night out partying and doing little things like that. And it's like
100%.
and again, like I take care of her and she's got some expensive habits, but they're not break the bank expensive habits that are gonna force me to like put in 40 more hours.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, look, at the end of the day, all of this is so I can afford some time to just sit there and watch you roll around in the grass. And you bring me joy just seeing that. And even if that joy is chemical, serotonin, or whatever it may be, it's much better than flicking through my phone and just having someone grab my attention all the time, or retail therapy, buying something and enjoying it for a little bit and then wanting something else. And it's like these sustainable concepts of joy, I think, are a lot more important. But then also, having a better relationship with discomfort. Like going to, an easy day at the gym or an easy day at your run wasn't a good day. There had to have been a level of discomfort and challenge, right? And then when you lean into that discomfort and challenge, as when you start to discover a new version of yourself that's always been there that you're unlocking. And then you're better prepared for when challenges find you. So I think for us, it's we the problem is in this commercialized society where everything is for sale, one of the best selling points is convenience. You know, how can I get the food delivered to your door, get the liquor delivered to your door, get the weed delivered to your door? How can you watch a TV show and pause it whenever you want? And now you have an endless library of TV shows. Everything's about you order a product on Amazon, it shows up within 24 hours. Everything is an endless convenience, and we don't, which is great. Convenience is awesome, especially if you grew up in the 80s or the 70s and it was a whole different world and you had to work a lot harder to get things done. But the problem with convenience is it kills our resilience. And when our resilience goes down, when shit hits the fan in life, we don't know how to deal with that. And we saw that during the pandemic, where life got very difficult, and people who were already leaning into the difficulties of their lives, why? And people who were so used to a steady paycheck, so used to just everything kind of working out for them, so used to all these modern conveniences, when they all went away, a lot of them, they had breakdowns. And I think it's really important for us to voluntarily, when things are good in life, voluntarily put ourselves in uncomfortable situations, because that'll build resilience. And when we build resilience, we also build self-respect. And when we build self-respect, we chase a lot less self-esteem, which is outside validation from the world, which at this point with social media is endless.
You nailed it, all of it. I mean, that's why I run marathons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons I'm romantic about running because I kind of discovered it or it found me at a dark season. But really, like things are really good right now. I'm in alignment. I've never been happier. I have a beautiful fiance, puppy. I love what I do. But to put that scary, uncomfortable goal in the calendar, it's not crossing the finish line. It's who do I have to become to be the type of cat that does that? Uncomfortable, the miles, the eating 100% healthy, all the things. And that gives me a little bit of an edge. And it's so interesting what you said. I think resilience and grit are some of the most important traits that people can cultivate. And it's true. I never thought about it like the way you beautifully said it, but with all the convenience at our fingertips, it's hard to be uncomfortable very often to be able to build the tolerance to be more resilient and gritty because we're so used to click, Amazon order, bang.
Yeah. And I remember for me, it was like, when I started like moving in different circles, and it was like a really extremely wealthy friend of mine. And he's like, yeah, I only take cold showers. And in my head, I thought, why would somebody with all this money take cold showers? And it was like he was creating discomfort for himself because you need it. And it was Naval Ravikant that said, like, the more convenient a vice is, the more the vice becomes a weapon against you. You know, if you gotta climb a mountain to get drunk, then climb the mountain and get drunk. But now you press buttons on your app and it just shows up. That's gonna kill your resilience quite a bit. And I'm sure even with your running, sometimes just lacing up the shoes is a victory. Sometimes just showing up to the track is a victory, whether you do it or not. And it's like, and then once you're running, I'm sure you have these moments where like I gotta stop, and then you push through it with the grit, and all of a sudden you quadruple your output, and you're
Right.
like, oh, that was a temporary wall that I broke through, and then there was a whole bunch of energy and a whole bunch of resilience that was waiting for me on that other side, and it makes you feel great about yourself. And when it makes you feel great about yourself, you're not out here chasing the world to make you feel like you matter, because you find that value internally.
You nailed it. I love this so much. Two things. Number one, I could totally relate to the puppy thing. Now what I do is, and I also have he's a killer Shih Tzu, half Shih Tzu, half
Yeah.
poodle. I got to tell you, brother, these poodles are so smart. Almost it's scary. Um, I'll take him out now, like in between meetings throughout the day, and I started to not bring my phone when I take him out. So just me and him, gone, the world, and just
uh,
it's so peaceful, and it brings me joy, and it's a little thing.
uh,
And I really like what you said earlier, and I think this is really important for the audience. It's like happiness is a byproduct, and it's not always there. Kind of like, you know, I've interviewed some of the highest achievers in all walks of life, athletes, actors, entrepreneurs, thought leaders. And one thing that I see a lot of people agree with, and I imagine you do too, is that people think that the high achievers are always motivated, not even close. They typically revert back to their training or their identity or their commitments. But we're not always motivated and we're not always happy, right? But the recipe is the same. You get after it. I love that.
mm. There's a good quote that a friend of mine said. Stephen Weatherford, he's a
I know,
former
Steve.
kick,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 former kicker for the Giants, and he said to me, and it always stuck. He goes, I teach my kids to honor their commitments, not their feelings.
Mhm.
And I thought that was brilliant. Like, you say you're going to do something, do it, because the person who said they were going to do it isn't the person that has to do it. So it's like you got to remember that despite how you feel. And again, it's a push through, but again, we require that. We can't be constantly chasing all these conveniences because this is making us soft. And the problem with being soft is not about definition of who you need to be as a person. It's because life is hard. And the softer we get and the harder life gets, the more likely we are to get taken advantage of by those in power.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Straight up. You mentioned earlier self-esteem and self-respect. And
Mhm.
I was looking at your content, which I suggest everybody to immediately follow this conversation. And I saw you talk quite a bit about the difference between self-esteem and self-respect. And I imagine there's some people that might not know the difference. Can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, so I define it, and again, people can have their own definition, but I define self-esteem as how we derive value from how others see us, and self-respect is how we derive value in terms of how we see us. And you hear this all the time. You see, people who are world famous and they have millions of followers and everyone loves them, but they don't have any sense of self-worth because they don't love themselves. They haven't done the work to deal with previous traumas. They haven't done anything that has grown their self-respect. And also, we live in a society, especially with social media, where self-esteem is monetized and it's quantified. You can count the likes. You can count how many people are following you, how many people are commenting on you, how many people are paying attention to you, and that's fast food. It's fast food love, and it makes us feel like it's easy, quick, it's cheap, and it's a lot less effort to acquire than doing the hard work to build self-respect. But the problem with this fast food love and outside validation and self-esteem is that it's fickle. You get a little bit of it, you want more. It's like a salty potato chip. You're going to keep chasing it. And I think it's really important to understand that we are not living in a space and a society that is encouraging us to improve who we are internally, feel better about ourselves. We live in a society that just wants us to produce for its economy, produce, be a part of whatever system that exists. And a lot of that often means keeping us anxious, keeping us chasing distractions, keeping us doing all of that. And I think that's a really important thing to understand because these, especially these social media platforms, they were designed by very, very smart people who were hired by very, very rich people to keep you addicted. And it's something that if we start pulling ourselves away from that validation and not stop worrying about the numbers and start focusing on, well, what hard things can I do in my life to build my own self-respect? A, you'll feel better about yourself, but B, a lot of the reasons you're chasing outside validation, those will start to fade, but you'll also end up getting more outside validation. People who are focusing on themselves, doing the work and improving, they're a magnet for other people anyways. And one of the best lessons I ever learned as a creative, when I first started, and I'm out there in LA trying to like get opportunities and network, a friend said, stop trying to get meetings and just focus on your craft. Get better at what you do and people will find you. Stop trying to find excuses to get people's attention. Others, get people's attention by being great. Don't get people's attention by clickbait, being polarizing, being a victim, being all these things. All that stuff works. But then now you're putting yourself down a path where you have to consistently do it. And we don't have a lot of people in history who can consistently maintain the world's attention by being a victim or being infamous or being polarizing.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. It's
No.
interesting. So many people, and I'm definitely guilty of this in the past, if I'm being honest, try to impress others, try to seek validation from other people's whose opinions aren't even valid. And I've been
Yeah.
there myself, and I probably still work on it. I think,
Yeah.
do you think that's like, is that part of our DNA? Do we pick that up somewhere? Why is that so common?
I think it's survival. I think our need to belong. If you look at the average human being 20,000 years ago, they were probably living in a small community of maybe 200 people. And making the community happy was important because if they broke rules or whatever, they would get kicked out of the community. And that probably meant death, right? So this need to fit in, this need to belong, this need to be accepted, uh, the opposite of that was death and danger. So I feel like what we have right now is we still have those needs to feel like we belong and are accepted. And when we feel rejected, it feels extra painful because this is like ancient software in our DNA saying that rejection FOMO, all of these things almost feels like death. And the challenge with that is now is we're not in small communities. You can't get ostracized. You're in Manhattan just like me. You can't get kicked off the island. And also there's too many people to make happy. You can't do it. And also now the goal of this giant village isn't for the benefit of all the people. It's an economic machine working for the people who own the economic means. So I think what's important is now we have to recognize that we're choosing to be liked over loved. And to be liked is to have as many people, notice us, approve of us, accept us. But to be loved is for us to stand up for ourselves, have boundaries, say no, and be okay with other people not liking us because we understand that they don't have a clear picture of who we really are. So I think the challenge here is humans don't evolve as quickly as a society has. And we're still operating with 40, 50,000-year-old software, etched into our DNA. But we're living in a modern society where all this small village mentality no longer serves a value to us. And I think that's really the big thing. So have grace for yourself that you want people to like you. Just realize it's a useless game to play because there's too many people and you can't make everybody happy.
Exactly. Right. And it's funny because I'm a recovering people pleaser and I lived inauthentically, brother, for probably 35 years. And
Mhm.
when I
Mhm.
reinvented myself and I was going to go all in on CLS, my brand, and what I'm doing now, there was no guarantee, although I was pretty confident that the characteristics that made me successful in other things were transferable and I'm resourceful and determined. The one guarantee that I made to myself is that for the first time ever leading into this, I would show up as the real, raw, strange, authentic cat that I am. And I won't be for everybody.
Mm.
That's okay. And ironically,
Yeah.
once I started doing that, that's when the world began to see me. Not a coincidence. But I think it's so important that not everyone's going to like you no matter what you do. So you might as well be your true, authentic self.
Yeah, as Dita Von T said, you can be the juiciest peach in the world, and some people just don't like peaches.
That's it.
You can't win them all, and you don't need to win them all. Again, we feel like we do because we our worlds were a lot smaller a long time ago, and if you had 200 people in your village, you had to keep them all happy. The villages are too big now. You can't make everybody happy, and not everyone's paying attention anyways.
Yeah. When you, because you're very recognizable now and you're doing your thing, I imagine there are some people that don't like you. How do you respond
Yeah.
to haters or stuff like that, or do you not even pay attention?
I think I got fortunate. Me and my friends always kind of rag on each other, like growing up. We call them daggers and darts. Little darts. Or any opening to make fun of each other, we always would look for them. And I didn't realize at the time, and when we were younger, it wasn't even healthy. Like it closed off doors of vulnerability. But we've since grown up, and it's a mix now. If I show you the messages in my friend's football league, it's endless. It's brutal the way they make fun of each other. But what I realized is I think when I first came online and I started getting negative hate, I would kind of judge it in comparison to what my friends would say. And I'm like, this stuff's not as witty. Like it's not as like they're not putting in as much effort as people that love me put in to make me feel bad. I think that was number one. And then I think eventually
They're not
um
witty.
I started it's not witty. Like you could have said something meaner, because I'm in music as well. So I've had people make music against me and stuff. And I'm like, oh, nothing that person said is worse than stuff that my actual friends would say to me. Um, and then I think the second thing that ended up happening too was understanding that, hey, like psychologically the negative stuff pops up. So let's say I get 100 comments and 99 are like, great job, Humble, love what you did, amazing. And then one person's like, you're not all that. Obviously, that one message will stand out. I think I realized very quickly how disrespectful it is to the kind messages for me to acknowledge that negative one. Why would it, if everybody else is saying kind things to me, why wouldn't I acknowledge them instead of that? It's always in the minority, the negative messages. And then lastly, I realized, and this is, through this journey and working with people and having friends who have built their own apps and understand the psychology of social media, it's also this idea of people wouldn't be saying things they're saying if there wasn't an audience. When you post something, the meanest stuff you get is in your public comments, it's not in your DMs. And it's because they're not even saying it to say it to you. They're saying it because they want to be noticed. It's an apparatus to be noticed in itself. So I started viewing it as graffiti. You know, if I put up a billboard and someone sprays graffiti over it, they're trying to use my platform to get noticed. And I realize that's their story, it's not mine. There's no validity in what they're saying. And lastly, they don't know who I am. I think Tom Holland quoted somebody that said, "If you have a problem with me, send me a text. And if you don't have my number, then I don't care about your opinion." And I think these are the important things where, again, we as a creature, we care about what the community thinks. But the internet's not our community. These are not our people. These are strangers who don't know who we are, who have a they're in the nosebleed section of our lives.
Cheap
They have a
seat.
limited, yeah, they're in the cheap seats. They have no idea who we are. Plus, on top of that, they're incentivized to be more negative because that's how they'll get noticed.
Beautifully said.
So none of it's me. None of it has nothing to do with me. So I don't really worry about it. And I think I've been in this game long enough now to start to realize that, you know, it's oftentimes it's just a big game that people are all playing, and everybody's just dying to get noticed, and they're finding different ways to do it.
That and also haters are confused fans, I think.
Well,
Remember,
that's the other thing too. Is like telling a friend who's an aspiring stand up comedian. I'm like, they're not gonna if they don't like you, they don't boo. They just stay silent. You know, real hate is silence. People that saw what you did and said nothing, that's more hate than somebody who saw what you did and said you suck. You
true.
know, they took the time to tell you something. You know,
I'm a big WWE fan, wrestling. I grew up with it. I've had a lot of wrestlers on the show. And in that organization, you get cheered, that's great. And if you get booed, that's unbelievable. The worst thing is that there's no reaction. People just go to the bathroom.
exactly. And we're in an attention economy where people's, they're especially from a professional standpoint, your value is derived in how much attention and eyeballs you can get. And again, there's a million ways to get these eyeballs and attention. In my personal opinion, I think the best way is to be excellent at something, you know, but that requires work, and a lot of people don't want to do the work. So they're going to go ahead and be controversial. They're going to be polarizing. They're going to play different games. They're going to say different shit. And I get it. I'm not here to knock those people. Let them play, do what they want to do. It's just they're not going to be around for very long. Nobody lasts very long doing that.
Yeah. I want to dive into the most recent book, and I know you have a new edition coming out too. But I wanted to ask you real quick, just straight off the cuff. You do so many cool, multifaceted, dynamic things, from the spoken word to the writing to the music, entrepreneurship stuff. What what are you most jazzed about? Like, what are you most about of all the cool things that you're up to?
I'm writing for TV and film now, so I've been working on scripts, and I think I'm really jazzed about that. Um, just because I think what I realized is there's a freedom in telling truth when it's smothered in creativity, and I think there's a lot more space and safety to say things that may or may not be popular when you smother it in creativity and find a clever way to say it. So I think for me, both writing scripts and then also even writing verses. I still make music. I don't do it professionally. I don't want to depend on people playing my music on TikTok to have a career, but I still do it. Right? I pretty much write verses instead of journaling, and I realize it's such a great place to share a truth that I could never write in black and white because that in itself would, uh, get cut up and misinterpreted and all of that. Whereas when it's an art, I don't know, I feel a lot safer. It's almost kind of like wearing a nice mask and getting to be even more free because of that.
Yeah.
Um, and then also just I think that additional layer of work, find a way to say it, but then find a way to say it creative with the creativity, and that's what gives it an original standpoint. So exploring comedy, exploring rap, all of this is really exciting. And with the books, I think the really cool thing about it now, especially where I'm at the career, um, having four major books with major publishers and them doing really well, is kind of understanding where I can be an artist and where I can be a salesman, and starting to understand that, okay, like these publishers have science backed data about what the cover needs to look like or what words need to be on the cover, but they're giving me freedom to say whatever I want on the pages, so pick my battles accordingly. And I think, from that standpoint, it's been really great. And knowing the secret sauce to all of this really is vulnerability and authenticity, which is just encouraging me to have a deeper understanding of myself.
Yeah, this is unbelievable. We just launched our first book too. it had success and so forth. Most importantly, it helped a lot of people. And it's funny because I could totally relate when they had their ideas in regards to the cover. And I was like, all right, you obviously know best. Uh,
Yeah,
Authenticity and vulnerability. I think those are the two, probably the most important traits to be able to connect with people. And for
yeah.
someone that's such a big platform, and you don't only have an audience, but you have a community. People look up to you, they
Mhm.
love it, they're very engaging. Were you always super vulnerable and authentic, or is this something you kind of worked on the last few years and really been able to connect more with people?
Um, I think when I started the journey, not even from a creative standpoint, like you reinvented yourself recently. I reinvented, I was an elementary school teacher. I quit my job to become an artist, and there was a solid 3 years where I was posting the highlights of my life on social media, but I had no money. I had next to no opportunities. I was living at my parents' house. And I think what it ended up being was having real conversations with my friends about it, like not wanting them to believe things were good for me. I didn't want to give this illusion to them. And then quickly realizing the more vulnerable I was with them, the more they felt safe to be vulnerable with me. So if I told somebody I was struggling financially, they didn't judge me. They just used it. They saw that as an invitation to tell me what they were struggling with. And I think that allowed me to see the value of it. And I think it took a little bit longer for me to do that with the general public. But then I started realizing, I'm like, look, the only way this is sustainable is for me. I think in the beginning you're like, oh, only my friends and family are supporting me, but I want strangers. I want people I don't know to support. Then you slowly realize, no, no, no. I want to turn everyone into my friends and families. I want to connect with them. I want them to care about me. I want to care about them as much as I can in terms of the scale of people that I have in the community. But I'm like, that's only going to come from being vulnerable and creating that opportunity and I think the community happened when I was able to create a space for, hey, even if I can't listen to each and every one of your stories, let me be the common thread for you guys to talk to each other and build friendships and relationships that go beyond just me. And I think that was a really important thing. And I think for me now, it's just been peeling away that onion. And it's what's made life exciting. It's like it's allowed me to continually be like, I'm not on autopilot. I'm finding more stuff happening with me. And that's happening through the writing, through therapy, through all of that. And then I've had experiments. I've done different things where I've done stuff super vulnerable publicly. And none of it has ever blown up in my face or made me feel any type of way. And then you start to realize that there's degrees of vulnerability, and even saying I'm having a bad day publicly is more vulnerable than other people will ever be, and you're encouraging them to do the same thing. And I know for me, especially with other creators, it's been empowering to them in the context of being like, oh, well, he can say certain things and not be worried about everything coming crashing down. And I think that that comes from not selling a dream. I think, as I said, like I'm selling the idea that you could be more open-minded than you are. You can become a lifelong learner. I'm not promising an outcome. I'm promising a shift in who you are as a person. And again, all of this requires inner work. So I think for me, the vulnerability is important. And I also just realized that's the only recipe to real connection, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's me and you talking on this podcast, whether it's me with a stranger on the street. Is being vulnerable is the only way to establish a connection with somebody. And if we don't, and that requires us to be authentic. And the irony of all that is people are dying to stand out. The only way to stand out is to be unique. The only way to be unique is to be yourself. You're a unique snowflake. Be the snowflake that you are with your unique design. And stop trying to fit in all the time. And it's just really interesting to see how these templates of society and culture have us doing that.
All the world really wants for us to be us, and yet somehow
Hmm.
we're the last ones to follow through on that promise. And I'm guilty
Yeah.
myself, and it's funny because that's why you kind of just helped me have a breakthrough. Like I I don't like small talk. Like it's not for me. Like, hey, how you doing? Like I want to get deep right away. Now, at least
Yeah.
this version of
Yeah.
right. That's where you can really like have a moment, connect, and like this conversation right now. I'm like high, like a dopamine hit because it's off the cuff and we're just vibing. And yes, there were things I wanted to ask you, but we're kind of just letting it flow. And when you can really connect like that, I feel like that's the portal for expansion. You could really get to know somebody and it's just that's how you connect is to be vulnerable. And for everyone listening right now, I encourage you. Doesn't mean put your entire, all the skeletons in your closet on blast, but take a small step. Even like you just said, like having a bad day. That's probably more takes more courage and more vulnerability than most people will ever do.
1000%. I think another great tip is, and this is a tip that I was given, have two vulnerable stories in your pocket that you're comfortable sharing with a stranger, a complete stranger. And one of mine is talking about my first dog. I had a dog. He lived 11 years. He had a great life. But I have regrets around his last day, taking him to the vet. We had to put him to sleep, and just not knowing how to handle that process, never doing it before, realizing he was super terrified on that operating table, in his last final moments, not knowing there was options to have a vet come to the house or different medication, all of that, and how I get triggered whenever I see another. And he was a German Shepherd. Whenever I see another German Shepherd, and then fast forward, getting this mini golden doodle years and years and years later, and then getting her during the pandemic. So the first 2 years or a year and a half of having her, first year, well, maybe first 6 months of having her, it was still pandemic time. Drop her off at the front door of the vet. They take her inside. And then when I moved to LA, it was the first time I saw that operating table again, and I had an emotional trigger from it, not realizing that had been sitting dormant in me for like 10 years. Um, that's a story I can tell a stranger on the street. That's a vulnerable story, and that set the tone for how we should be speaking to each other. It doesn't have to be an intense skeleton in the closet, you know, but that's a better conversation than, hey, so what do you do? You know, so you like movies? You know what I mean? Like, these are conversations you can have with people, and because we're afraid to be vulnerable because we're afraid to be judged. But I think the average person wouldn't judge me for telling that story, and they don't need to know me deeply to tell a story about losing my first dog.
First of all, I love it, and I get it, and that's why I like to open up these conversations, get to know you a little bit. Like, what's your superpower? What do you take pride in?
Yeah,
What you're really good at? One thing that's like a pet peeve to me, and I imagine you can relate because you get interviewed a lot, is so tell us how you got here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your journey. It's just like it's not
yeah,
refreshing. It's like it's hard to connect right away when someone asks you that right. You're like, oh, another one of these. It's based on my experience.
yeah. No, completely. And I think that's the thing too. It's like that requirement to go deep, or that requirement for things to matter. That's how this becomes a journey with another person, and the ability to be seen. Everybody wants to be seen. This is how you do it. Let people see you. Start. Be the first one to do it. And I can promise you, the vast majority of people will receive your vulnerability and become vulnerable with you. They're not going to laugh at you. No one's ever laughed at me for telling them about losing my dog, but that's better than me telling them about my career highlights, or what celebrity I met, or where I'm taking my next vacation.
Totally agree. Love this. Your last book was a massive success, How to Be Loved. I know there's a new version coming out soon too. You're very well known for talking about love a lot. Why is that?
Yeah.
What's so important to you about love?
So the truth is, with me specifically in this humble the poet journey, especially with the books, um, I fell into this because I was exploring things that I was struggling with. My first book is Unlearn, and that's just the whole book is about expectations and expectations of life and romanticizing life and our beliefs. And I was writing to myself because I was struggling with expectations, feeling betrayed by the world, feeling betrayed by other people. This book on love is no different. I was in a deep relationship, I was engaged, and then it all ended. And I became obsessed with figuring out how I fucked it all up and where I messed it up. And I took a deep dive into understanding love, self-love, um, and what it meant. So for me, and this has been something I've been reconciling with as of late, I write these books selfishly. I'm the kid at the front of the class taking notes, and then I'm just lucky enough to package those notes into beautiful art, and then sell them, to the world, which allows me to keep doing this. But for me, it's less about this. I'm not on a mission to spread love to the world. I was on a mission to understand love for myself because I felt like a failure. And this journey of having a deeper understanding of love came from studying philosophers, studying scientists, studying psychologists, studying poetry, studying religion, and being like, all right, well, let's see what everybody is saying about love. What are the common threads? What are not? And then I did it so much, I started hearing love in everything everybody spoke of. You know, every Kobe Bryant interview I would watch, you could hear his love for basketball. You know, everybody you started discovering obsessed people talking about things that they really cared about deeply. Exactly. And then you can hear that love. So for me, that's why I talk about love a lot, because it's that beautiful breeze that is like just flowing through our lives, and we think we have to find it, but we just have to do the work to open our sails, and capture a little bit of it. It's not something that we have to earn, or we have to deserve, or we have to be worthy of. It's something that's always there, and generally our choices are either opening ourselves up to realizing it or closing ourselves off to it.
For this. And you don't, there's a misconception that you talk about that people feel like they must be enough before they could be worthy of love. But you're worthy
Yeah.
now, right?
There's no worthiness. The worthiness isn't a measurement. That's like saying, enoughness. The analogy I say, enoughness is for your gas tank in your bank account. Is there enough gas to get me across the city? Is there enough money for me to buy these concert tickets? That's what enough is. You can't measure a person in terms of enough. What's enough of a person and what is not enough of a person? These measurements don't make sense. And I think oftentimes what it is, it has less to do with even love, because when you think about family members, or when you think about your new dog, or when you think about, I always think about my niece, my baby niece. I held her for the first time, and I was flooded with feelings of love. I don't know her. We have no history. We've never had a conversation. We have no core memories together. We have no life experiences together, but I'm still flooded with love. On top of that, she could throw up on me, she could use the bathroom on me, and none of that would disqualify her from the love that I'm feeling. So you start to realize, like, wait a minute, in this world, and then I think about my friends and my family. I'm like, I could write a whole list of all their flaws, what makes them imperfect. None of this disqualifies them from my love. So I started asking myself, well, why do we have these feelings? And I think oftentimes the feelings come from, when we were kids and we had simple minds, we had developing brains at 8, 9 years old. We were thinking in terms of black and white. And we internalize things in terms of, well, did I get the response I wanted? No, then I have to do something different. Did I get the response I wanted? Yes, let me keep doing that. And we started interpreting these responses. Like, did dad laugh? Did mom hug me? We started interpreting these as love. Not realizing that half the time our parents are tired working all day because they love us enough to feed us. And then I think on top of that, when you start thinking about romantic love, especially the dating scene has a bunch of conditions, but that has nothing to do with love. Yeah, you got to earn a second date. You got to earn someone's time. You got to earn someone's attention. None of this is love. This is just the game of dating. And I think all of that makes us think that love somehow is a game. But love in itself is going to come through establishing pathways through vulnerability and authenticity. And you can do that with a romantic partner, you can do that with a friend, but at the same time, you do that with holding a baby in your hands. And the baby's done nothing to deserve your love, but you love it so much. And I think from that standpoint, you realize that, look, love's always there. There's nothing that we have to find. It's just something that we have to realize. And sometimes it's about opening our eyes, opening our sails, opening our hearts to it, and realizing that our choices are what's opening us and closing us off to it.
Yeah, so good. Love all this. You're very present and mindful. Imagine I'm not the first person to tell you that. How do you, I know it's a muscle that you can develop. How do you stay so present and mindful? Like, for example, you're not worried about anything else in the world right now because it me and you just connecting. And that mindfulness ends up being that portal to expansion based on my experience. It's something I've gotten much better at, but I'm still work in progress, is to not let your mind race, just be so in the moment. How do you do that so well?
I think the big thing is respecting my limitations. So I realize, so for example, like my phone's black and white. I have no social media on my phone. I have a whole separate phone that has social media on it. Now, that's the same idea of, they say you want to eat healthy. That doesn't start in the kitchen, that starts at the grocery store, right? Don't bring the unhealthy food home, then you don't have to rely on discipline, right?
True.
So I make a lot of adjustments to my environment to make it easier to be present. I don't rely simply on a level of discipline or grit on my part. I try to make it easier for myself, because I catch myself, like, if I do have my social media phone in my hand, I might get stuck scrolling like an idiot, for
Of
two
course.
hours. That salty potato chips are delicious to me too. So I try when I'm in a good space, I try to adjust my environment accordingly. And I think even small things like having the AirPods in allows, it blocks out the sound. I have you on noise cancellation. So I'm in New York and I'm on an avenue. There's noise and stuff happening, but it's not going to be as distracting. I create those environments accordingly. I knew we were going to have a long conversation. Took the puppy out for a 2 hour walk before this. Now she's, completely asleep beside me. So it's little things that I do like that, where it's like, look, I have grace for myself, and I'm like, how can I hack this? How can I, instead of me just trying to be better, how can I improve my environment to make it a much easier situation? And also, again, we're having a conversation about stuff that I care about, and I think that's the other way that this becomes important.
It's unbelievable. We talked a little bit about love. How can someone begin to receive more love?
I think going back to vulnerability, um, the challenge with who we are as people is that we develop a lot of it at such a young age, and we develop it through our choices, and we develop it through our coping mechanisms. But we still have a developing brain. Like there's science that says the brain's developing up until 27, all the way to 30 neuroplasticity, and you're developing your personality. Like the most important ages are like I think 1 to 4, but then also like you know, when you're in from like 8 to 11, you're doing so much and you're still in black and white thinking. So I think the big thing is realizing that what what we were doing to try to survive our childhood, whatever it was, emotional damage, physical damage, whatever, it was based on the fact that we had limited tools. We didn't know. We're kids. We're literally just dumb little kids. We don't know what to do. So we just try our best, but we never upgrade our software as adults. We never go back and revisit that and say, well, what was I experiencing? And I think about this a lot with a friend. A friend, she had a traumatic. She didn't realize she had this, but going through therapy helped her realize this. When she was really young, she went to her aunt's house, and then her mom had taken her baby sister and left to go run an errand, leaving her at her aunt's house by herself, and she felt supremely abandoned. And that developed an abandon, and she thought it was her fault, obviously, as a little child. Never revisited this until she was in her 30s. And then she was encouraged to have a conversation with a little child version of herself. And she's like, well, look, mom didn't abandon you. Mom had to run an errand, and she trusted you could stay home by yourself with the rest of the family. And she had to take the little sister because she's a baby. Man, it wasn't abandoning you. It was actually a sign of faith in you. And she's like, that made her feel 10,000 pounds lighter. So often we don't have context when we're kids. You go talk to your parents and they're tired and they snap at you. You think it's your fault. And then, as an adult, you realize, no, they were tired. They came from work. They have other stuff on their minds. So I think for me, is you realize as kids, we build up these fortresses to protect ourselves. And then as adults, those fortresses turn into prisons.
Mm.
And then we don't realize that we're both the prisoner and the guard, right? And we think we're still protecting ourselves, but we're not protecting ourselves. We're locking ourselves in something. And what we have to do is we have to go through the process of breaking down those walls, because those walls are not a fortress protecting us, and they're just a prison keeping us in. And it's also preventing anybody else from getting in, and it prevents us from getting out with vulnerability. So we have to let go of these walls. And that's going to come through doing your journaling, being authentic, going back and revisiting the most painful parts of your life, and realizing the decisions you made at 8 years old to protect yourself are not going to serve you as an adult. And I think that's the way to receive love, and start simple. Learn how to receive a compliment.
Mm.
That's the first step. We all struggle with this. And it's because we have these walls up and we're afraid of being seen and we're afraid of being vulnerable. But again, we're not kids anymore. We can survive this stuff. And we don't need to look back and blame our parents. We can be our own nurturing, loving parents now. We can do that for ourselves as the adults that we are. And we can go back and have conversations with our little inner child and be like, look, I'm here. I'm big. I'm grown. I'll keep you safe. Let's take a risk today. Let's let down these walls. Let's tell somebody something vulnerable. It's all about these walls that we have. We think we're protecting ourselves, but we're really imprisoning ourselves.
So good. I couldn't agree more with everything. So much alignment. We'll land the plane with a couple final nuggets. You talked often about boundaries, and I was checking out a piece of your content, and I saw one of the captions, and it really moved me, and it was so relatable to me, and I think it will be for the audience as well. And you wrote, "It's okay if we disappoint people on the way to living authentically." And I imagine that has something to do with setting boundaries, and maybe
Yeah.
if it's not a hell yes, it's a no, right? Something else that you say. Is
Mm,
that what you mean by that?
mhm. I think what I've learned too is boundaries is literally, I think often we look at boundaries as building these walls up and these fences and saying, no, I have a boundary. Like, don't cross my boundary. But what a boundary really is teaching people who you are. It's your instruction manual, you know? And what I suggest to people is when they establish a boundary, when they articulate and communicate a boundary, use the word, speak in the first person. So instead of saying, like, hey, Craig, uh, you're rude to me, man. Like, treat me with more respect. I should say, hey, I'm only going to be around people who treat me with respect. And if I feel disrespected, I'm going to leave. Now, I'm not attacking you. I'm not saying anything about it. I'm telling you my story. And it's my universal story that I'm not trying to be around anybody who does this. Instead of saying you, I'm saying me. And it's my instruction manual with what I'll do and what I won't. And that's me honoring myself and that's me expressing self love. Part of expressing your self love is to stand up for yourself and show your teeth. Sometimes you have to do that. And we think, and again, we don't like showing our teeth. We don't like standing up for ourselves because that makes us feel unlikable. The problem with being scared of being unlikable is that you're definitely robbing yourself of the experience of love. On top of that, if you choose being liked over being treated properly, then you're going to find yourself in the world of resentment, which is such a dark place to be in. It's better to tell people how you feel and not resent them than try to be a peacemaker and sit with that resentment. That's poison.
I've
So for
been,
me, boundaries is teaching people how to be around you.
yeah, I've been there. And you know what's so interesting? When you start telling people how you feel, even if it's a tough conversation, based on my experience so far, because I only recently started doing this, the person that you're speaking to actually respects that you spoke your heart and said what you said, and it actually has the potential to strengthen a relationship based on my experience. So I imagine that won't always be the case, but even recently, like somebody, I had a conversation with them, I didn't like the way I felt after, and I was like, should I let it go? But then I knew that would lead to resentment, and that's heavy, and we don't have time for that.
Yes.
And so I shot this person a text, brother. And I just said, "Hey, I just want to speak from the heart and just let you know how I felt after we hung up from that call. I didn't love what you said, and here's why." And that was it. Surrendered. And then they came back and totally owned it and apologized, and actually they thanked me for helping them see a different outlook, and it strengthened our bond moving forward. That's something the
Mm,
old Craig wouldn't have done. So it's so
yeah.
important for so many reasons to really speak up and be authentic.
And I think it's also understanding that like everybody when they're interacting, even if it's not obvious, is like carrying this level of anxiety over saying and doing the wrong thing. So establishing a boundary is actually gifting them clarity. We're like, wait a minute, I don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing because this person is telling me for them what the right and wrong things are. And yeah, I have multiple experiences establishing boundaries and it strengthened my relationship with people. I've also established boundaries with people and I've never heard from them again.
Hmm,
And it's part of that. And you're not losing anybody that way. And I think it's also extremely important to recognize too that when you establish a boundary, you know, to have grace for people. If somebody's been in your life for 20 years and you've never established a boundary with them, you can't go ahead and just knock them over the head with a bunch of them. You're gonna have to slowly work your way into it because you're gonna catch them off guard. And humans do not like change overnight. Change needs to be gradual. It needs to happen slowly. So have grace with people when you establish boundaries with them if they're so used to a certain level of treatment. That's not saying let them step on you, but it's finding ways to articulate it in a way. And I think the last thing I want to point out, because I'm sure there's a lot of men in listening right now and women who are committed to growth with you.
definitely.
Um, Emotional availability means your emotions are available. So the interesting thing is, this context of like women wanting an emotionally available man, they need to acknowledge if they've ever met an emotionally available man first,
Hmm.
because emotionally available men will have emotions. I'm not, if I'm upset and my voice gets loud, that's me having an emotion. I'm allowed to have emotion. And that's me being authentic and vulnerable. Me behaving a certain way is not allowing me to be, I'm not being disrespectful by being loud. But when men are upset, we get angry. When women are upset, they cry. It's different. I can hold space for someone to cry. They can hold space for me to get angry. And I think that's really important in this, where it's like, it's not about us just being likable and enjoyable and pleasant. We should feel safe to be everything that we are. And this is important, especially when we talk about these ideas of emotional availability and connection. It's okay, as a straight man, there are so many issues and experiences as to be a woman that I will never understand because I don't have that biology and I don't have that life experience. But I'll try my best to understand it, and it's got to be vice versa. And I think from that standpoint, this isn't requiring us to always act a certain way just to be likable. It requires us to be our authentic selves. And again, at a certain level, you can't, you as I said, it doesn't have to be skeletons in your closet on day one. But you set this intention that when I want to deeply connect with someone, like we're having a first conversation today, I expect our 10th conversation to be significantly more vulnerable. We're gonna keep going deeper. And I think that's the important part with this as well with other people. It's be mindful when someone shares an authenticness and a vulnerability with you or a boundary with you and be like, oh, okay, wait, that might not be convenient for me anymore, but I understand what they're doing. And it's healthier to understand this. And we're both better off having that clarity.
Couldn't agree more. Final nugget, we'll land the plane with this one. Probably an interesting one to land the plane with. I saw you write this and I just thought it was cool. Don't let anyone else ruin your day. It's your day. Ruin it yourself. I think I know what you meant by that, but tell the audience.
I mean, it's light. I wasn't trying to be super deep. I think
I know.
empowerment, yeah, empowerment is important. The only way to feel empowered is by embracing responsibility. People often can interpret that as taking the blame for things. I look at it as I have to look at where I'm responsible if I want to find where I have the power. If I live my life thinking it's happening to me and everyone's doing stuff to me, then I'll constantly feel like a victim, which is an addictive feeling in itself. It's a fast food version of self love because you feel like you're making a connection with yourself that you feel no one else can make with you. But the empowerment to improve your life is when you say, well, what part of this is my responsibility? And oftentimes, I say, your problems may not be your fault, but they're still your responsibility. If I'm driving in my car and somebody hits me, it wasn't my fault, but I still got to do the insurance. I got to do
Deal
the
with it.
body shop. I got to deal with it. That's my responsibility. And that was kind of a light joke, pretty much saying, look, like chase the empowerment, and also like ruin your own day and take ownership with how you ruined your day, and you're better off than assuming the world's out to get you.
Feel good, brother. I could talk to you for 20 hours straight. Best part for me, just the beginning of the friendship. Um, I know I asked you before what you're most excited about. For our listeners, about 6 million now, they're very loyal and engaging. What's the best way for all of them to support you?
Um, you can find me at Humble the Poet. Um, I think that's about it. I'm about to go in a cave and start working on the next book. The next book is about anxiety, and one of the reasons I came to this city is to have a deeper understanding of all things anxiety. And that's going to take up my life for the next year. But I mean, by all means, check out the books, check out the art, check out the music, check out the YouTube. All of that's there. And I do have a mailing list if you want to, get some of my musings and thoughts. By all means, join that. You can find everything at humblethepoet.com. And I also have a private community with about 10,000 people. And if you realize that you dig what I say and you think it's like going to a concert. You can make friends easy at concerts because you all like the opening, you all like the main act.
Yeah,
So I like viewing myself as the main act and creating a community where you guys can all mingle and become friends with each other and DM each other. It's pretty much a social media platform just dedicated to, I call it my handsome friends. And it's just dedicated to everybody that's on the same journey as me. And they can connect with each other instead of simply just everything being based around me.
love it. Love all of this, brother. And we're gonna put all that stuff in the show notes, the newsletter, all that, the community and everything. Humble, hang out for 1 sec. I want to connect to you after. I want you to know the
Yep.
definition of authenticity, curiosity, and deep vulnerability. I can personally guarantee your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless, juicy nuggets today.
Thank you, brother.
That was unbelievable. I could speak to you all day.
That was a great conversation. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize you were right here. Let's definitely stay connected.
Yeah, take my number and then we'll stay connected. I'm